Almost 3 years ago, I installed this aftermarket head unit in my BMW Z4, and it was one of the best modifications I have ever done on this car as far as daily drivability. But unfortunately, this old unit has started having issues recently, so now I'm updating it to a more modern unit that's faster with better functionality. I will go over the specs and functionality later in the video. First though, let's quickly check out what's in the box. I decided to go with this Ugode brand because they have really good specs. You can see some of the stuff at the bottom here, but I wanted to highlight the Qualcomm CPU. It's Android 13, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, latest versions, CarPlay, Android Auto, GPS, all that stuff. One more thing that's really important for me is that this will be a bigger screen. So this is the actual screen that we're going to be installing. This is a 12.3-inch screen. Looks really nice. The one I have installed in the car right now is 10 inches, so this will be an upgrade in itself. We also have the bracket that's included, so we're going to be installing that first, and of course then slotting the actual screen in. This also feels very solid, looks to be really well built, and the screen actually looks really nice. It even comes with an aftermarket iDrive controller, so it's going to work with this system. So if you don't have anything in your Z4, this will make it a full setup. We also have nice wiring diagrams, so it shows you how to connect stuff and what goes where, but I'll be showing you that in the video. Lots of pictures here as well, and even more installation instructions. Obviously, we have our head unit harness, so we will be plugging this into the head unit of the vehicle, like your stock stereo. You also have cables for aftermarket camera, which I do have installed in this car, and I will be connecting it. I'll show you how to do that. A few other cables for GPS and Wi-Fi and whatever else is needed to be connected. But yeah, very cool. I'm very excited. So let's get this installed. So here's a quick comparison between the old screen and the new one. So as you can see, this is about 10.25 inches, and this is much bigger. Look at that. This is going to modernize this car so much. It's going to look so good. I'm very excited to get this installed. Now it's time for me to remove the old screen and all of the wiring, but in your case, it might be as easy as removing the original storage compartment. But you will still have to remove all of the things that I'm showing you in order to put the new wires in. So let's get started. I'm going to be using a couple of these trim removal tools just to make things a little bit easier. And the first thing we're going to do is just remove this trim panel. It simply pops out just like that. Next, we're going to remove these two Phillips screws, which in turn allows us to remove our head unit. I'm just going to put a little cloth here and then leave it on the side because we have to access two screws that are just right here. For most other screws in here, you will need a Torx T20 bit. So I got myself a kit just like this. It has pretty much everything you will need to disassemble a dashboard like this on a BMW. So get yourself one of these. They're very cheap and very helpful. There's also a screw behind this little cover, so we have to pop it off. Next, we need to remove 4 screws that are holding this piece in place. So it's going to be one here, 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 and here. With all those screws removed, we should be able to pull this entire piece off. You can start at this corner to make it a little bit easier. These are some of the old wires that I had from the old unit. We will be removing them. To make it just a little bit easier, I will be removing this panel. You don't necessarily have to, but you can just unclip the connectors here and take it out, so it's easier to kind of see what we're doing. So you just have a few connectors right here, and this whole piece can be taken away. Finally, we have access to these 2 screws, which will allow us to take off the air vents, and then we will be able to access the bracket that's holding the screen in place. There's another connector here, which I will disconnect as well. Take that to the side. There's the view from the top. It's a little awkward to work here, but you can just pop off the grill. And we're just left with 2 more screws that are here and 1 on the other side. With that, the entire unit is now removable. So we can just take it out, and it'll be the same for your storage box. One thing I forgot to mention, make sure you disconnect your battery before you do any of this. All right, so I can just start unplugging things now. You can pull out the old wires. You can, of course, skip all of these steps if you're installing it for the first time. I'm going to disconnect the existing wiring loom, at the same time disconnecting the car's wiring loom from the unit. So this is the only piece that comes from the car. This was aftermarket. This wire is coming from my rear camera, so I have to make sure I reconnect it to the new wiring loom. And there you have it. We have the old wiring loom removed. So I just reconnected this connector to the head unit, and basically this is what it would look like if you were installing it from scratch. So the first step is to remove this plug right here, and it just pulls out like that. And we'll be plugging this into the aftermarket unit's wiring loom. So I know all of this looks intimidating, but honestly it isn't. This is our main wiring loom that comes with the unit, and what we're gonna do is plug this into the existing head unit right here. This will go into the car's wiring loom, so this cable right here. Then this connector will plug into the new screen. And then the last wire we have here is the iDrive wire. So this will be for the controller. That's basically it. All this other stuff is just accessories in a way. So we have some USBs. I'm going to plug those in because you can then plug in a USB drive or even plug in your phone to charge and things like that. Pretty useful, but you don't have to. You have your GPS antenna. So if you're not going to be using built-in GPS of this unit, you don't need it. I will plug all of them in just so I have them, but you don't have to. You also have this audio out. Some cars will need this plugged into the auxiliary port in your car. Mine doesn't, so I will not be plugging this in. But if your audio is not working, you may need to plug this in and run it to the auxiliary port. We also have a wiring harness for cameras. So if you want to do like 360 cameras, you can plug this in and make that work. I might actually add this in the future. Seems pretty cool. And you have this 4G antenna. So that's helpful if you want to plug in a SIM card into this unit, because this unit does have a micro SD card slot and a micro SIM slot. So you can plug that in and have constant internet on here if you like. First, I'm taking the existing plug from the car and plugging it into this female connector. It goes like this. You push it in and then it locks in. On the other side, we have the male connector. This will go into the head unit, the existing head unit on the car. Same idea, just push it in. These can be a little finicky, so you got to be careful. Make sure you get the bracket in correctly on both sides, otherwise it's not going to lock in place. There you go. Now we take the other end of the wire and we're going to route it all the way up through there to where the screen's going to be, and push it through. Now I'm just going to install both antennas somewhere out of the way, right over there, so it has a clear view of the sky, more or less. While we have everything disassembled, it's the perfect time to wire in our USB cables. I'm just going to go through here. There it is. So I have my USB cables in the glove box compartment. I want to make sure my bracket fits properly. This looks good. Now I can fish these wires through so I can connect them to the screen. And I'm just going to put a couple of screws so it stays in place for now. So basically just plug everything in. It's pretty much impossible to do this incorrectly. Here's my USB plug. And lastly, the main head unit connection. Make sure it does not pull out when you tug on it. We can now fish the wires back in through the bracket. And put the screen in place. There it is. All right, so there's only a few things left here for me to do before we can put everything back together. And that's gonna be taking this camera detect wire, adding a little connector to it so I can plug in my existing wire that's coming from the back. Check out that video if you wanna see how to actually get a reverse camera installed in your Z4, aftermarket reverse camera right here. There it is. This is just a signal wire, so it should be no problem. And I'm going to plug in this wire that's coming from the back. And the video signal from the camera goes into cam CVBS in. Now we can hide all of that stuff. Now that I'm more confident everything's fitting correctly, I will put the other screws in the back of the screen. I will even put this cover back on. So basically this part is ready to be reassembled, but we do have one more thing, and that's the iDrive controller. So we have to route this wire through here and get this installed. I'm just going to grab a trim removal tool and just pry it up like that. So I'm just routing that wire underneath that plastic piece so I can pull it out. Probably going to be easier with these. There it is. Now I can go underneath this trim piece and we can remove this little storage container. No doubt it will use a different type of torque screw. Probably a T10 if I had to guess. Indeed it is a T10. Now we can just install the controller. One of these screws is not lining up for me, but it seems to be pretty solid in place, so I'm just going to leave it like that. Now we can plug it in. Route this wire out of the way, so it's not going to get crushed or anything like that. And let's see if we can put this in. This is usually a bit tricky, but doable. I think that looks good. All right, let's finish it all up right here. Make sure you plug in your vents in. Okay, looks good. Now we can put our dash back in. Of course, we're connecting all of these connectors. All right, I'm gonna reconnect the battery and we'll see how our install actually went. Hopefully everything works. Hey, look at that, it's already turning on. All right, the screen looks really good. Let me clean it up a bit from all my fingerprints. Very nice, take off the sticker. Wow, that looks nice. Make sure the controller works, and it does. All right, well, I'm gonna play with this for a day or two, and then we're gonna do a review of the actual unit. But as far as the install, it's pretty straightforward. Yes, there's a lot of steps, but it works pretty well. I did forget to put this part back in, and that's pretty easy. We're just gonna do that, and there you go. One last thing I wanted to do today is actually connect my phone, so I'm gonna go to telephone. There's Bluetooth pairing, okay. The name is GT6BC something something, which showed up on my Bluetooth scan. That looks correct. Pair, allow sync. There's my phone, it just showed up. It launched Z-Link, which is, I think, is gonna be the Apple CarPlay. Connect Apple CarPlay. Let's see. Wow, that was easy. Let me exit out of this. Well, that was very easy. That took like no effort to set up. So the setup is super simple. Now I want to make sure that audio is actually working out of here as well. As obviously you can see there's a map. It worked. I love it. That was very simple. And the screen's super responsive. So we can add an app to be one of our favorites. So I'll do the Z-Link because that's going to be in my CarPlay. So now if I want to just swipe here, click on that, and I'm straight back in, or I can go back to the car. Nice. It's been a couple of days now, and I'm happy to report that this unit has been working flawlessly, and I'm impressed with how intuitive and easy to use it is. In the previous clip, I connected my phone and set up Apple CarPlay, and from then on, my phone automatically connects to the unit when the car starts up. Let me demonstrate. So I'm going to turn the car on. My phone is just right here. So for the first time, as you can see, it does take a few seconds, but nothing too unusual. Now we see Android system is starting up. And now if we let it wait, it will automatically connect to my phone and then of course bring up Apple CarPlay. Or we can just hit this application right here. Now it says connecting, please wait. And just like that, we are now in Apple CarPlay. So that didn't really take much time at all. It's also really well integrated into the vehicle system. For example, the screen auto dims when the headlights are switched on. So it's not as distracting to drive. And the cool thing is you can actually adjust how much it dims in the settings here. It also detects steering wheel position, so you get driving lines when you are in reverse. So if I'm going to put the car in reverse, it's gonna turn on the camera just like that, and we can see that the lines are actually moving as I'm moving the steering wheel. Additionally, if we scroll all the way to the right here and click on dashboard, we get this pretty cool screen, but what this also shows us is that it can actually see our speed and our revs. It can see our fuel level. Yes, I'm pretty much out of gas. It can see if the door is open or not. It can even show you seatbelt signs or other warnings. So that means that this unit is integrated into the CAN bus data. This makes it feel a lot less aftermarket and a little more OEM. And one thing that I was really worried about with this unit is the audio quality. And I'm very happy to report that there is no degradation in audio at any volume level. So if we go back to Apple CarPlay, for example, and we go to Caribou Lou by Tech9, as it starts playing, we can crank it up and it sounds amazing. And the reason I'm so concerned about the audio is that I actually have upgraded the amplifier here as well as the speaker. So I want to get the best out of my investment. And yes, if I press this button down, for example, it's going to go to the next song. If I press the other one, it's going to switch back. So all of the stuff is very well integrated into this unit. I was going to spend some time talking about the hardware specs, but honestly, it doesn't really matter. The unit is very smooth and it does not lag at all. Look at it. It feels pretty much OEM, almost on the level of my BMW X7, making it a pleasure to use and navigate between screens. Speaking of the screen, I really like that it's an IPS display, which means it does not look gray in the sun and especially at night. So a lot of the screens, the cheaper screens you'll get, whenever it's dark and there's like dark colors like right here, it will just look gray, and that stuff does not look nice, especially at night. The touch controls are also very responsive. So as you can see, if I scroll to here and go to settings, for example, it's like that. It's very quick, making it feel a little bit more premium, and it's a pleasure to use, really. I actually went with the lowest spec storage, as I don't plan on copying too many files onto here or installing many apps from the store. So as you can see, I only have the 64 gig version and 4 gigs of RAM. It's plenty. It feels very fast, and it does not feel like it's dragging its butt when you're using it. Everything just kind of works. And yes, you can download and install any app that you would want from Google Play Store. So you can go in here and then just download whichever apps you want. So if you like, you can install YouTube, Amazon Prime, Netflix, Disney, and watch it straight on this display. But for me, I'll be sticking with the Apple CarPlay for now. One thing to note is that you cannot be connected to both. So if you are connected to Apple CarPlay, your Wi-Fi will not work. So it's one or the other. Of course, if you install a SIM card, then that works perfectly fine. You can have the SIM card and your phone, so you can have both items at the same time. But the way it is right now, you have to choose whether you want to have Wi-Fi from your phone, the hotspot, and then you can use YouTube and all that other stuff, or you use Apple CarPlay. So you choose. I'm also happy to report that the iDrive controller works perfectly fine. So we can, for example, go to Apple CarPlay and use it as you would expect. You can scroll through all of the items. We can go all the way, for example, to the split screen. So if you like, we can have the map here. We can have all the other stuff on the side. But yeah, anyway, you can use the controller if you prefer that, or you can, of course, just use the touch screen, which works really well. But the screen does get a little smudged, as it does have a shiny glass on top. It may look a little bit reflective on the actual camera, but in person, it looks pretty good. So this is basically the main screen that you get when you log in. This app on the left here, I put it in here as a shortcut because this is Apple CarPlay and I want to have it readily available right there. Normally you would have to go to apps and then scroll and click on this if it didn't automatically load, which it has done for me every single time I have used this system. Then you have your weather. You have your music apps. You can load songs on here or even stream it directly from your phone if you're not using Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. Car info, well, on my car it doesn't do anything because I never had an original screen in here. So basically all it does is just show you a clock. But if you had an OEM screen before and you replace it with this one, it would take you back to the BMW system. You have different modes. You can, switch it to like sport mode, for example. Phone, you can connect the phone directly if you're not using Apple CarPlay. I am not going to be using that. Obviously, you have the dashboard that I showed you earlier with all the information. So if I open the door, it shows you that the door is open. Very cool, like that kind of stuff. Then we have video, so we can actually go in here and play any video that you have loaded up on this device, or a micro SD card, or whatever it may be. They actually have included some movies in here. Let me get out of that before I get copyright striked. You can have real-time navigation. You will have to have internet for this. Otherwise, yes, it has GPS built in, but for the maps to load, you will need internet. And then on the left side here, we have apps, which I showed you just earlier. So this is like the actual Android screen, and you can use it to set up a DVR. So you can have a dash camera basically built into this if you like. You can also add some auxiliary screens. So you can put 2 screens in the back of a vehicle, for example, and play videos for your kids, and lots of cool functionality here. And you have a few like GPS tests and other apps. On the left side, you have music, telephone, and navigation. Pretty basic there. But one last thing that I haven't shown you yet actually is if we go to settings, here we have some system settings. So going in here, we have reversing settings. You can have those tracks that are there when you're reversing. You can mute the system while you're reversing, and you can change it from aftermarket camera like I have now, or if you have an original camera, it will use that as well. You can enable 360 cameras, tons and tons of stuff. You also have display settings, so you can make the things bigger and smaller, change the brightness, how the brightness behaves when the lights are on, for example. So it will go into night brightness and it will lower it to 30 at this time, but you can change it to whatever you like. This is just what I prefer. You have your Bluetooth settings, so you can use the installed Bluetooth or the original from the car, and also have a mic gain. Unit settings, DVR settings, I'm not using it, so I can actually turn that off. That's not needed in my case, but yes, you can even install a USB camera if you like. Auxiliary settings are actually very useful, and I'm very happy that this system has so many options that you can change. And what this will do is automatically switch to your auxiliary input whenever this unit is on. You can select your default apps for video and music, and a few other settings in here. where it will remember which system to go into when it starts up for the first time. You can switch to basically any language that you like. Tons of languages in here, good to see, of course. You also have your Android settings, so you can go in here and change, connect to Wi-Fi, set up your internet and things like that. One last item I wanted to show you that's actually really cool if you're into this kind of stuff is if you go to factory settings and enter 2018, which is the password here, you get access to all of the backend stuff, which is just amazing. So if, for example, your reverse is not working, which it didn't for me at the very beginning, you can go to vehicle, for example, and switch when the camera activates. So for example, for me, when it's in gear type 1 and I go into reverse, nothing happens. But if I switch to gear type 2, now the reverse is turned on when the camera is activated. How nice is that? So you can adjust it based on the settings of your vehicle or based on the configuration of your vehicle. You can also, like the steering wheel track selection, so you can change how that behaves. So you do all these very nice customizations, for example, how many doors your car has and, speed value and the 360 cameras and cornering lamps and everything else, vehicle buttons. So you can adjust how all of this works. You can even go in and select the CAN protocol if you're installing this in a different vehicle, and you can adjust a few different options from here as well. Very, very cool. For example, maybe I want to disable the weather APK or the sound APK if I'm not going to be using it, or if you're using an aftermarket amplifier, you can configure all of this stuff from here. So what I'm trying to say here, I guess, is that I am very impressed with how much they have actually built into this and how well it works. I was mostly impressed with my previous screen because it worked and it gave me Apple CarPlay, but it was very limited in anything else that you could do on it. This seems like a much more advanced, much more modern unit that I'm gonna keep for as long as I can. One thing that could be improved on here is maybe the bezels. So if these could be a little bit slimmer, so this would be, I don't know, half an inch lower, it would be maybe a little bit better, because if I'm sitting really low in the car, it does block a tiny bit of view just from this corner right here. But if you adjust your seat properly, it shouldn't be an issue. It also is a bit thick compared to the previous unit I had, but honestly, it looks very modern and I can't really complain too much about it. Well, guys, I hope this video has helped you install or at least decide if this is something you want in your BMW Z4 or basically any other BMW of the same generation. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe to the channel if this is the type of content that you enjoy, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.